Welcome to Patriot to the Core. I'm Thad Forrester. This podcast exists because of my little brother, Mark Forrester. He was angered by the attacks on 9/11, so he joined the military to help rid the world of terrorists. On September 29, 2010, he was killed on his first deployment. From his death notification to the dignified transfer ceremony, his viewing, funeral, and subsequent memorials, I was amazed at the new world of warriors we met. These patriots have become close to our family and been huge supports. They stood out because of their willingness to voluntarily fight evil. They believed in freedom. Because of their actions, I started this podcast to interview great Americans who serve their country and communities. Thank you for tuning in. All right. Well, Don Stevens, thank you for being here on Patriot to the Core. We were just talking about recent world events, and with you being a former combat controller, you're retired? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
A little over 30 years and retired about 3 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think with the DoD saying that 900 troops roughly are being deployed to the Middle East right now? What role would combat controllers play if you think they're part of any of that group?
The firsthand knowledge is kind of since left me. You have your suspicions and you have a good idea and those kind of things, but there's not you're not asking questions you don't really need to know the answer to. But if I had my guess, there are people in all kinds of specialties and roles being positioned in whatever part of the world in such a way that they can rapidly respond to certain things. They can take those gifts and those talents and forward deploy them in such a way that they can make an impact. I purely guess. There's probably guys and units and personnel that are staged in various levels in different locations. What does that look like, or what's going to be their role? That's really hard to say. That's really is going to be up to combatant commander and the entire echelon downstream from there. But combat controllers have their specialties, and there's a T-shirt that says we do it all, and that's because while combat controllers can go in and conduct dive operations and jump operations and halo operations and all those kind of things, the bread and butter really is in the air to ground integration, right? Taking those air power assets and being able to bring forward some very uncommon capabilities, air traffic control background to joint terminal attack control, and a number of other things, really sets the stage for a lot of things that SOF does. Whether it's extracting people from torn up buildings, or doing some type of rescue, or bringing in aircraft and supplies and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a whole slew of operations that have to happen. And the combat control career field kind of brings that capability, those things to fruition. Because you have to have access, right? You have to have access. You have to have some kind of penetration to be able to do those things. So I think they're going to play a pretty important role with like they always have with everything that's going on.
You to me seem very unique, and you'll have to just tell me and correct me where I'm wrong. Is you didn't start out in combat control. You went through at like 32 years old. So will you talk about that experience, what you did before, and then why you went into combat control, and then how was it? Because 32, you got an ego check. I think you got to have there for sure. That had to be not just anybody could have done that. I don't think, for several reasons.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, your ego gets checked pretty quick. So think about when you were 18, you think about somebody that's 32, you're like, gosh, man, I never want to be that old. Imagine going through that that pipeline process. Super rigorous, super physically demanding, mentally demanding, emotionally draining, and sometimes it it was one of the greatest experiences I ever had. But yeah, it's very different for an older guy that is already deployed, already done a few things in another career field, to come in, and now you're the new guy. So I was 32 when I retrained, and that was a whole endeavor by itself. I was in security police and security forces, and I was a criminal investigator. And I originally wanted to come in and be a combat controller, but the wait time for me to get a seat at NDOC was pretty lengthy. And candidly, I was 19 years old and I needed to get out of town. There's a lot of influences in and around the Cincinnati area. So my dad was a cop in the Air Force. He made a career out of that. So it made sense that I would go into security police, and with the option of retraining, in short time. For me, that wasn't a short time. That was more than a decade later, and I was a tech sergeant when I retrained, and so physically, I think I was there, and if I'm being honest with myself, when I was 19 years old, I probably didn't have the maturity, and I probably didn't have the discipline that was required to get yourself through that process. Hats off to the young guys and gals young guys that have made it through that process, and at such a young age. I don't think I had the maturity at the time. So I think all that time period was a blessing, in that I wasn't ready. I probably, and that's just in my head. So at 32 years of age, yeah, I was more than ready. I was a little heavy though, not heavy as in fat. I was just kind of a bigger guy, right? So I think I arrived there at Lackland. I was probably pushing 235, pretty lean.
How tall?
About a little less than 6'1". So I'll just say 6 foot. Yeah. So, and there was a lot of running involved, right? And I could run pretty decently. I did a lot of training leading up to it. I played football and ran track in high school, and did a little bit of wrestling. My dad was a judo sensei, so I physicality wasn't new to me. But this is a different level of physicality. And this is a different level of intestinal fortitude and kind of mental toughness to get through it. So I felt like I was well prepared when I got down there. But what happens when you get at Lackland, especially if you're a senior guy? So I was a tech sergeant. I'm surrounded by airman basics. I've got like a second lieutenant, fresh out of wherever. And they give you this vest, because you're the leader, right? And that vest has 1 2-pound weight in it, and it has a whole bunch of empty pouches. I think we started off with 56 kids in that orientation to get accepted, so to speak. And every time one of those guys would quit, every time one of them would, just wash out or couldn't muster or got injured or something and couldn't make it, well, their 2-pound weight had to go somewhere. And so that's what I got to wear. So
because you were the highest ranking,
right? Yeah, enlisted. I had a second lieutenant with me, but
okay,
and he had a vest as well. And it's kind of a metaphor for the weight, and I hate to call it a burden, but the weight and the burden of leadership. But it's also a privilege, right? And so I had the privilege of wearing that weighted vest with constant reminders when I was, we were off running, 3 miles or whatever, because you kind of start off slow. When I say slow, I mean small distances. We weren't running 6-10 miles yet. And so that was an interesting thing, 32 years old, body's taking a few beatings. But I wasn't as old as I am now, where, going through it now would be just, wow, that would be tough. So yeah, so being in that environment, and you have cadre who have been there and done that in a lot of different ways, that are younger than you. They've been in the military less time than you, and all those kind of things. I mean, you have to approach that kind of thing with, no matter what you know, or you think you know, or how you feel about yourself. You have to approach that kind of thing with a certain level of uncommon humility, and that kind of became a theme, for what I would talk to young guys at the units about, is carrying yourself with that uncommon humility, because it's a different thing. You're going into a place as a new guy. And it was interesting, get to go through the pipeline. And on graduation day at Combat Control School, Master Sergeant results came out. And I was on the list. So now, not only am I a brand new guy, getting through this pipeline, but I'm going to arrive at teams as a senior NCO. And one of the cadre who I consider a good friend, they're all good friends of mine now. They might be mean to you in the pipeline, but they're really with absolute purpose and intention with everything they do. He said, I'll leave all the expletives out, but he basically said, what the hell are we going to do with a master sergeant that doesn't know squat? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's an absolutely fair and honest and true question. It's like, how's this going to work out, with this new guy? And I thought it was fair at the time. I was like, that's a great question. I guess we're going to see how this goes. But you end up kind of adopting that mentality. At least I did. And I think that's, those are the kind of things that I think led to my success in kind of getting in with the teams, getting in with the guys. Is you get on team. I started off with silver team at the 2-3, and then I took over blue team at the 2-3, and I had Chris Grove and a number of different guys. And while I outranked, and I was a team chief, I was team sergeant, I have to constantly remind myself that I don't know as much as some of these guys. Some of these guys are senior airman staff sergeants and, been deployed as combat controllers once or twice, had more experience in that world than I did. So it was very humbling. It was very humbling. And then you have to strike a balance somehow between, I have to lead people. I have to first master my profession, and so I can be an example, right? So you go through that process, and then once I'm able to do that, I have to be able to hand down everything that I know and everything that I've learned along the way, and just strike that really weird balance between being a leader, being confident, being competent, and at the same time being humble and having thick skin and being able to joke with the guys like, hey man, I'm still the new guy. You're their boss, but you still have to say that. I mean, you have to. You have to let them know, hey, man, I'm not all that in the bag of chips. I'm the new guy here, but I'm going to take you everywhere that I think that you need to go to be successful. So
That sounds like I mean, it work even in also the civilian world. Like I've started work at a place where I was brand new, and yes, I was a senior materials manager, but I knew jack squat about this place and really what they did because it was a new company. I found the people that had been there a while and seemed to care and said, hey, how do we do this? How do you do this? Teach me, because there's something, definitely I'm bringing something to the table, but I don't know jack squat about the actual processes with that particular company. I mean, I think that's huge for the people that you're working with and managing.
it is. I think people will always remember how competent or incompetent you were. They will. But more importantly, once you get past that, they won't think anything about it, because it becomes the expectation. Yeah, you're supposed to know your job. You're supposed to be dedicated to being good at your job. But the thing that will be lasting with them long beyond hey, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Okay, this guy's doing okay. Hey, this guy's actually really good at his job. At that point, nobody's thinking about whether or not Thad or Don or anybody else is, they were great. They sucked at the beginning, then they became better and, wow, they're a superstar. They don't think about those things because the expectation is you're a superstar. You do your job well. What will be lasting for them is how you conducted yourself. Did you come in with a sense of arrogance or entitlement or something like that? Or did you come in humble? Did you treat others in the same way you'd like to be treated, whether you're superior or subordinate? And those are the things that will stick with people, I think, more than anything else. There just becomes a point of a limit of advance as far as what people are going to really care about and remember. So when you do master your profession and you're in because people respect the competence of your work, or your skill set, that just becomes no need to mention it because it's an expectation at that point.
Yeah. I want to talk about an aspect of combat control responsibilities that I don't think that I've covered much at all on my podcast. I've had several controllers, but the humanitarian aspect, and you've had some experience in that. Will you talk about the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, I believe, early 2010, and then what your role was in that, and how you got the folks stood up and got deployed, and what they were, what the role of combat controllers was down there?
Yeah, what a huge thing, right? That was an interesting point in time because we were doing what we called one-third rotations with 3 squadrons we had. The 2-1, 2-2, and the 2-3 were sharing combat deployments because we were just spread so thin. You have this high demand asset, right? In special tactics, combat controllers, pararescuemen, and so on and so forth. So, the demand signal in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Africa, and in other places was really, really high. But you only have so many competent, capable, qualified, certified operators to go and do X, Y, and Z, along with their counterparts, 18 series, Green Beret guys, SEALs, MARSOC raiders, and so on and so forth, right? That whole entire joint force. But they want this force multiplier of a combat controller. And they definitely want ST guys, being part of those efforts. So it became tough. So we were very thin. We were deployed 365 days a year. And what I mean by that is every squadron had 1/3 of their squadron as a minimum deployed 365 days a year. So that was pretty tough. You supervise people that were deployed, and when they got back, you were gone. So really knowing and monitoring and being able to properly manage and lead and mentor your people became really, really challenging during those days. So I kind of start off with that to say I was in a position there where we were doing a lot of pre-deployment training. We were trying to get guys JTAC qualified, assault zone qualified, all these different things, whole bunch of skill sets they really have to hone because you deploy, you come back, you train, prepare for deployment, deploy, come back, and that cycle just kind of rinses and repeats itself. So I had to figure out a way to manage this monster. At one point, I've got a PJ team, with a brand new officer. So, you can't just leave them flailing around. Then you have two other teams, which are comprised of mostly combat controllers and a handful of soft TAC Ps. And it's like, okay, now I'm the master sergeant that has to manage, the training and preparation, deployment, readiness for all these folks. Because we also have an alert status where people have to be on standby. Aside from the tasking for deployment, we had to have people ready to go in the event that the Haiti earthquake or something like that happens, right? So it was tough to balance. And there is a reason that I'm telling you all this, because we were doing a jump train up as part of what we call CFEDP. It's basically line items that guys have to stay trained and current and qualified on, and then upgrade some guys on a few things. So we were doing this week-long kind of jump train up, with some tactics involved, some other stuff. I got home and got to bed about 10 o'clock at night, and about 10:15, 10:30 or so, phone rings, answer, and all I hear is the chief on the other end saying, "Hey, Don, you got to come into work." You don't really ask any questions, you just roger that, and hang up the phone, get a few things together, kind of spin around in your mind like, okay, I wonder what's going on. No other requirements, just get here. So I drive in, and the lights are all off, and there's no cars in the parking lot, inside the compound.
Is this at Hurlburt, or are you at Pope?
This was at Hurlburt, yeah. So I arrive at the 2-3 and going through the gates of our squadron area there. And there's nobody around. And kind of curious, I park and I go walking in the building. There's one light on, and it's in the commander's office. And I walk in there, and it's I think it's the DO and the chief, or the DO and the commander. But either way, I walked in, and I'm the only guy there with the squadron leadership. And so my first comment, was, "Hey, what's going on? Is this an intervention? Like, you guys need to talk to me about my drinking? Like, what's going on here?" And he said, "No, there was an earthquake in Haiti, so we've got to gin up rescue and recovery and assault zone, basically airfield operations package really quick. Got to get ready to go right now." So that's pretty standard for us to initiate, recall and start putting all the pieces and parts together. You want radio guys, and I mean, operators really just can't get out the door fast enough without the support folks at the squadron. Like, it's such an integral part of this. Without them, it would be tough. And that, not to digress, but that goes back to that uncommon humility part that I said. I kind of carried that as something that I talked to the guys about. I'd say, it's cool, you got a funny looking hat, sexy beret, and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you better realize that your ability to do a lot of different things depends on a lot of different people that don't wear this hat. So don't think you're better than them, because you're not. You can think you're cool. We raise guys to do uncommon things, that require a lot of bravery and a lot of heroism. But you can't let that level of confidence ever go over into arrogance and thinking that you're something better. Anyways, that's just
what about, so when it comes to support staff, I think of like the guys who pack parachutes. What are some of these roles that you're talking about for support?
So you have radio maintainers, and a lot of training comes from those men and women that are in those specialties. So you got radio maintainers that they cover everything from line of sight radios to data transmission, which we won't go down that road, it's really long. Satellite communications and all those different kind of things. Because without a radio, combat controller is just another special operator that can shoot, move, and communicate. But that radio is the most powerful weapon that we have. So you got those folks. You've got parachute riggers. Your life is in their hands every single time that you jump one of their pack chutes. They do all the inspections. There's a whole bunch of stuff involved there. You have vehicle maintainers. You have a dive shop. You have intel. Operations without intel is just foolish, right? everything that happens in operations. Everybody's like tip of the spear, the sexy mission, all that kind of stuff. None of that happens without these things. You have aircrew life support. You have administrative people, right? You get all these functions inside of a squadron support those operations. Like those operations will never happen without all of those supporting aspects of it. So now recall, right? Bringing all those pieces and parts together. Calling support people. The first person I called was Chris Grove, and I was like, hey man, I got to come to work. Same phone call I got, right? And he's like, gotcha. He was there in pretty quick time, and we just started rolling. Getting the right human assets in there for the right purposes. And so that was PJs, that's combat controllers, and some other flavors, and as well as support folks. And that ran so efficiently in large part, because I get the tasking order. I do some task organization, start directing priorities, all these different kind of things. Most of that stuff, you got guys like Chris Grove and some other guys, they understand that, and they just start rolling with it. So really, really easy and efficient to work with guys that are super competent in what they do. And they can take orders and say, yep, roger that, boom. So we moved out really fast. And in my mind, because this is the way it kind of started off, is I'm going to be the team leader. I'm going to be the team leader on the ground. We're going to run this airfield. We're going to get those people the help that they need, whether it's rescue and recovery and extraction, with the PJs and other assets that we take in, bringing aircraft in. So we're doing airfield analysis. What are we dealing with here? And what we were dealing with was a single runway, earthquake-stricken country, chaos everywhere. We don't even know if we can land on it, or we're going to have to jump in, clear the runway, and then bring in other aircraft. Because what you start to get those bits of information and intel that are like, USAID and all these different. Everybody wants to come help when there's a big problem like that. What that means for us from an air management standpoint is there's going to be a lot of trains on that track that need to get on the ground with a single runway. How are we going to do that? So you start to analyze those things. Long story short, we got that package together and ready to go in probably around 4 hours or less, where we could have put men and equipment on a bird and went and did the mission. What we didn't have was a bird, so we had to wait for aircraft. So the 2-3 was ready to go, and we just had to wait for the aircraft, which is an entirely different logistical problem set with everything that's involved with not just interstate air travel, but now international air travel. You can imagine all that goes into that. So we had them ready to go, and then I go back into the chief's office, and they said, hey, listen, commander says, hey, listen, that big 18-month short cycle planning training plan that you built and that you're running, for the squadron for our next deployment? I said, yes, sir. He goes, who's going to do that? Because we don't have very many 7-level combat controllers or 7 levels period that are going to run this training. We might need you to stay behind and make sure that the squadron's ready to go from an operational combat ready standpoint. And I felt my heart just kind of like, I'm getting pulled off the mission, but it was the right call, selfishly. It's like, yeah, I want to go on the mission. I want to lead this. I want to watch these guys knock it out of the park like they always do, and do some good things, to do some good in the world. But the decision was made. And so with very few people to go around, that's why I led this with, here was the environment with a 3-squadron rotation and all that kind of stuff. So who was going to go in my steed? Well, frankly, I think Chris Grove could have just been the team leader. He had been a combat controller longer than I had at that point, so he would have been perfectly suited to do that. But the decision was made to send the chief, along with him, which is not a bad idea either, because a lot of diplomatic stuff, whole host of things once you get in the country and you get on the ground and people you got to deal with. So Tony Travis went in my steed, and he was the chief of the squadron. And while I wasn't happy about not going on the mission, I totally understood, and I think to this day it was the right decision. And I think he was named Time Magazine 100 most influential people or some kind of.
Yeah.
So I'd rather not be on magazine covers, so that's another blessing. Maybe it's good that I didn't go, because I would not have enjoyed that kind of publicity. So so humanitarian missions, huge, and you can look up a million, not a million, but you can look up a whole bunch of them on the internet, and you'll see how they shake out, from the the things that happen in the Pacific, the kids trapped in the caves in the Pacific, all those different kind of things. You can look up the impact that the operators have on that.
Yeah, and I've had an episode on the Thai cave, the soccer team rescue too. So that was really cool, really interesting interview. And Tony Travis, I've tried to get him on here, and my memory's not great, but I don't think he was interested in doing it at the time. Maybe, I don't know, it was probably a couple of years ago, but maybe he'll join me one day on the podcast. If you ever talk to him, just put a little bug in his ear, maybe.
Yeah, if I can find him.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe he never responded. I can't remember now. So Don, about deployments, you theater, you had several deployments. I think Iraq, Afghanistan, probably Africa, probably other places. I know this is a real broad question, but just for sake of time, as you think back and reflect on those, what stands out? Maybe it's some challenges, maybe it's how you integrate with your new team, like the ODA team or whoever you're attached to, because I know that's got to be tough. You're always the new guy, you're always the Air Force guy, and we talked about that recently with another guest, how no matter what, you're the it was a PJ. I had a PJ on Nick McKinley, and he was saying it doesn't. Yeah. He's like, you're the Air Force guy no matter what, so you're always having to prove yourself. How did you address that, and what are some other things that stand out with your deployments?
The first thing I started to learn and really think about is everything that goes into preparing, the Air Force soft ST guy that's going to oftentimes, attach with one of these other teams, and how, what kind of deliberate process happens in order to prepare them, right? So you think about it, 19, 20 years old, senior airman, maybe 21 years old, E4 senior airman, and you're going to go join, some guys that had several rotations, and now you have to meld into their entire culture. They have to have confidence in your capability, in whatever your specialty is. And so, there's a lot to prove every single time. Now, as I started off with, as a 19 or 20-year-old guy, did I have the maturity and the confidence and all those different kind of things to be able to do that as well as these guys do? I don't know. But hats off to them, because my first experience with doing that as a combat controller was as a master sergeant. So that's a little bit different. You come in with they're like, oh, E7, okay. That automatically gives you some bona fides, but you still have to prove yourself. You still have to show that you have to show that you're more fit than they are. You just have to, because you're carrying more stuff than they are, period, not, right? And that you're going to be a good teammate, that you're going to be there despite the dangers, but despite the challenges, all those different kind of things, you're going to help them find solutions to any problem out there. And then once you earn the respect, man, everything just flies from there. So yeah, it's I think about one deployment where my helicopter lands. I drag my boxes off the helicopter. I'm on the HLZ. The team leader, who's an 03 captain, Army captain for this ODA. It's like team leader and his weapons sergeant. They come out to meet me. We shake hands. There's a couple ATVs. Throw the stuff on the ATVs. We go to the fob. I check out my luxurious accommodations. You check that whole scene out. Okay, do I have power? Can I secure this room when I sleep? All those different kind of things. You start going through all this stuff. So I've been on the ground for an entire maybe hour and a half, 2 hours. And so I'm just trying to, I don't even have a chance to kind of get to know the guys on team. We had a couple of discussions, but right away I want to get my head wrapped around, what's going on in that AO, that area of operations. So I go in and I see the guys that are working, basically the small little artillery, fire center, see what kind of resources they have available to them, just getting to know the lay of the land. So I'm walking outside and boom, big explosion. We're getting hit with 105s, 105 shells. And as you can imagine, I'm still getting oriented, because up to this point, the only thing I've done is I've done a ton of map studies and research on my own, and you interface with your intel folks, find out all the information you can. You read the sit reps of everything that's going on at the location prior to arriving there. So I'm still getting my feet out underneath me, and now.
And your ODA doesn't even know your name yet, do they? Or do they?
Yeah, like a couple of them do, right? Okay. They're like, "Where's the JTAC?" Holy shit, where's the JTAC? Excuse my language. And so I run and I throw my ruck on, and I already have my comms loaded. Everything's ready to go. You have to arrive on the ground that way. You got to be ready to go as soon as you get there. Crypto fills the whole nine yards. So I go up to the corner of this this forward operating base, and work a few aircraft, and I'm trying to find out where this fire is coming from. Like, where's the enemy at? Unsuccessful, right? Nobody got killed, nobody got injured that day. Did some damage to some of the facilities there on our small little footprint. And so this kind of thing just became recurring. So that was like I'm there. It's like, okay, welcome. And so then, you don't really have your opportunity right off the bat. It's not ideal, to go into that situation that quickly, but it happens. So now, really starts to accelerate the conversations you have to have. It's like, hey, where are you from? Cool. Oh, you like to fish? I like to fish too. All that different kind of stuff. What do you know? What don't you know? All right, sir, here's what I need. I need this information in case we get, a danger close situation, blah, 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 blah. And you start getting down to, hey, we never know when we're going to need this information. So you start to exchange what you know and what you don't know. And, that respect and rapport starts to develop. But, they had been dealing with this for quite a while. But utilizing some of our organic internal ST intel assets, I managed to get some uncommon air assets. I'll just put it like that, to kind of map out the strategy and plan to identify where these folks were. This rocket cell that it kept pounding them, and some other places, frankly, because they're hard to find when everything looks the same, you know. So we devised that plan, and we went out for a mission to execute that plan. It probably took, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks to develop this thing. You got to wait on products and all this stuff. So we went out basically to look at some of these areas that I had mapped out to try and find them. And right about the time we were thinking, gosh, you know, we found some evidence, but we might not find them here. They kind of found us, and I'm in the first vehicle. We roll over the ID, and vehicle number 2 gets it. Huge blast. Everybody's bells rung. Nobody gets significantly injured in that, and so that was an ambush. Long story short, you know, we ended up killing that rocket cell that day without losing any lives, which is pretty unbelievable. But
what aircraft? How'd you do it?
All organic weapons. So we were in a, you know, it was a bit of a politically sensitive environment. We were close to a border of another country, really close. Like, there it is. Go over that way. You're in that country. Walk over this way. You're in this country. You know, not that short a distance, but really, really close. So as soon as that happened, you know, my job, you know, like I said, the radio is our number one weapon. Can be really great, you know, shooting a rifle, shooting a handgun, you know, doing all these different kind of things. But at the end of the day, you know, that comm suite is what are going to save lives and execute some missions. So I'm trying to get comms right off the bat. I'm looking around. There's smoke, you know, there's kind of confusion and chaos. And I get out of the vehicle, and we start taking fire. You know, I'm able to check on the guys. They're all they were protected pretty well. But they were kind of just shaken up, you know, and kind of confused as to what was going on. As you can imagine, got a big bomb blow up underneath you. So I'm still talking with them, conferring with the team leader, trying to get a hold of the centralized location that basically apportions and allocates aircraft. Trying to put this in very plain terms. Oftentimes what happens is they can hear you, but you can't hear them, you know, and Murphy's Law always applies too, right? The time that I need it the most,
yeah,
I can't get assurance that somebody can hear us, right? We're down in this little ravine. So I have no other recourse than to return fire as I'm running up this hill that has zero cover. Like, there's no big rocks. It's all just itty bitty rocks, and you can barely get your footing. So I'm running up this, rounds flying by, and yeah, I'm like, well, this could be the end. We'll see how it goes, because you're just exposed out there, and you're just, you know, it is what it is. But I had to get comms, and I knew that, because otherwise we're in a black hole, and kind of nobody understands our status. And finally, I get a return via SATCOM. You know, they were like, yep, call sign 10. Call sign wasn't my call sign. Call sign. We've got Harry Lima Charlie. We've got 2 F-18s en route, 10 nautical miles out. And so all of a sudden you get this instant feeling of relief. Like, now I got to get back down the hill, not get shot. And so everybody's shooting, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And I get 2 F-18s on station, followed by 2 A-10s, which are awesome, and then 2 F-15s, and then finally an AC-130 that they kind of kept overwatching while we were out there. We were trying to get the vehicle set up to tow. This is what we were doing at that point. We successfully killed the bad guys, so that was what we wanted to do: go out and hunt these guys down. they found us, and we ended up to being the victors. And eventually we limped back to the fob, with an AC-130 overhead. At that point, you feel pretty comfortable. Yeah, so that was our first, hey, how you doing? Aside from, my initial fob, and they're like, okay, you're going to be all right, man. We're going to be all right, and they start to recognize that when they have a controller. Frankly, any ST operator, they have them, with them, and it's just good, just goodness.
That what always amazes me is in that setting right there, your life is on the line. You've got fire coming, and you've got an A-10, you got F-18, F-15, you got an AC-130. You've got to be able to communicate to all those aircraft and know their capabilities if they need to drop anything. So that's what's amazing to me about your role, is how you can do that all under taking fire on the ground, talking to your guys on the ground, and you and more that I don't understand.
Yeah, that's the whole scenario I just explained is pretty simple, really, compared to a lot of the operations guys that, in my humble opinion, are better than I could have ever been. The missions that they executed, much longer, much more complex, a lot of different variables in there. It's amazing. It really is amazing. All the things you just described. I'm still in awe to this day. When I think about the operations that I witnessed, whether I was in the siege of Sodif, the task force command and control center, or I was out there alongside them or on the other side of a ridge line when something else was going on, having the understanding of what they actually did and the challenges that they overcame, and was able to do all of those things that you described. Even being a guy that was well adept to it, and qualified and competent and all that kind of stuff, I still look at other guys and some of the volume of work that they had to put in there and the expertise that it took. And it's just amazing. It really is.
Yeah. I know that you have some strong thoughts on PTSD and how it doesn't have to be a big deal. Will you talk a little bit about that? Maybe what you've experienced, and then what you share with to help others going through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of hit the nail on the head with some words that I would use. It doesn't have to be a big deal. And I say that because PTSD isn't new. Right? It's not new to the human condition. It's just different, and it's a lot more, information about it is a lot more readily accessible. And, just like in everything in this age of instant information, people talk about it more, and in some cases, it's really serious, significant clinical diagnosis that really needs some focused attention. In a lot of cases, there are simple things that we all can do. And I think the first step in that is exactly what you said, which is it doesn't have to be a big deal, because PTSD isn't just a military phenomenon. It's not just something that people in combat experience. People experience it with all kinds of or life situations, whether it's a vehicle accident, or some kind of, abuse issue, or, whatever it may be. It is just a traumatic event that affects you in a certain way. And some of that is, the mind and, arguably, the spirit trying to protect you in some form or fashion. And then what you do with that information is a whole other thing. So the first thing is just acknowledge what it is. Okay, this isn't real. Be able to separate fact from fiction, reality from fantasy, and all those different kind of things. I guess my first experience with it, in this context for the military would have been in April of 1994. And you remember significant times like that. It's like, why April, yeah, I know specifically it was April 1994. It's when 2 Black Hawk helicopters were shot down by friendly fire and some confusion in northern Iraq. And at the time, I was an E4 senior airman in southeast Turkey, and I had the full bird, for whatever reason, come to me. I saw kind of some Army folks running around on this real little tiny site that we were in, and I wasn't a combat controller at this time. I was security police, protecting some assets and airbase defense, kind of stuff, protecting that little footprint where we were up in those mountains, kind of near northern Iraq, northern Syria. And but we had some Army folks and some Black Hawks there. This is kind of in the time of kind of post Desert Storm, Operation Provide Comfort kind of era, and said, "Hey, we need you to get some guys together. We've got to get some guys out to TUTAF, which is Second Turkish Air Force, little airstrip out there." Didn't really know what was going on. Then we got together for a little briefing, and they said, "Hey, this is what happened. We've got to assist in it any way we can in getting the remains recovered." And really just I'm still kind of surprised at this, but maybe it was a good thing. And the colonel was like, "This is going to be really bad. If anybody doesn't want to do this, opt out now." And some guys kind of stepped backwards, like, "Yeah, man, I don't want to have any part of this." And I was like, "What? No, this is why we're here." Long story short, we were there for quite a while, and that night, I don't know, it was dark. It was probably midnight. The first Black Hawk came in with remains from the recovery with PJs on board, where they extracted the remains and probably classified anything that needed to be extracted from the wreckage site, basically, for those 2 helicopters. I think it was 26 people were on board, and some of those were Army guys that I was playing spades with the night before. You just you start to put that together at a later date. And so strapped on the rubber gloves and walked up to this first helicopter. It was open doored on each side, and it was a small pile of body bags, except for the top, and the top was a completely, for the most part, intact, completely burnt up cadaver. So this is my first experience with not seeing a dead person or a dead body, but a body in this condition, right? And the smell stays with you for
I bet
pretty much your life. And so I looked at the guy next to me, and he looks at me like we're both surprised, like, it's kind of surreal. And so we take it with all the honor that we can muster, and take that person's remains over to a tent where everything has to be inventoried, medically examined, all those different kind of things. And then we start offloading body bags, and we're covered in body fluid, and that it's with you now, like you're a part of this big time. And I can't remember exactly how many more helicopters came in with remains, but it seemed like quite a few. It was probably 3 or 4 or something. But each one that came in, the fewer body bags they had, because the PJs had a big undertaking, as I understood it, because we weren't forward at the crash site. We were kind of at the next lily pad, from the crash site, or the place where those aircraft rested. And then, so as they were coming in, they became less and less organized. As you can imagine, pulling body bags up these cliffs and whatever they had to deal with, and they start getting torn up, and they're pretty much, next thing you know, you're out of body bags. You're just using whatever you can. And it literally got down to the point where you were just carrying pieces of parts, not to be I could get more graphic than that, but I think that's graphic enough. You're carrying these things with all of the dignity that you can, and then it's over. Then you pass this stuff off to the medical authorities and other authorities, and somebody else takes this from there. And those things have to go through that process of getting the remains back home, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. Right now, there's a big investigation going on in how this happened. But our part of that mission was done. So we went back to our little footprint there, and I just take off the clothes and I throw them away because I'm covered in this clear body fluid, and the smell. It's a weird thing. It's for years, and even up to this day, if I ate a cheeseburger, I need to wash my hands after I'm done. Like, I can't have that smell, and so that's like a little PTSD thing, right? But I didn't realize how much it really kind of impacted me, and it took me a few years to really even kind of be comfortable with talking about it, because it affected you in that way. Looking back on it now, having experienced some other things, totally comfortable with it. And I look at it and see what it was. I even wonder to myself, I'm like, why did that bother me so much? And that's just, it's not, maybe it's desensitized, maybe desensitizing, or maybe it's something else, or growth. But either way, I look back on it now and I'm like, we had to do a very important thing, and you get over it. But so I do a lot of talks because I didn't talk about it. I kept all that down inside. Either you don't want to reveal to people that you're not the tough guy, or you let something bother you or whatever, you can move on. And there are times where you have to compartmentalize different things in order to be effective in what you got to do today. I get that. But long-term health is choosing healthier things to deal with those. And part of that is just talking about it, kind of recognizing it for what it is. So those kind of PTSD things, came over into other aspects of operations, where I can remember the look on a person's face. They were trying to, I don't have to go into great detail, but we were getting ambushed at close range, and they're trying to kill us. So I killed them with organic weapon. And everything slows down into slow motion, right? So and whether this is fabricated in my head somehow, or that's actually what I was seeing, that, like, minutes after that, all I could remember was the look on her face as soon as I was passing tracer rounds, through them.
What do you mean by organic weapon?
So, or what I mean is whatever firearms that I had on my person. So the team's weapons. So if we have a Mark 19, a saw, squad assault weapon, machine guns, M4, 9mm, grenade launcher, all those different things, whatever we had on our person.
Okay.
If I'm talking about non-organic weapons, I'm talking about naval gunfire. I'm talking about aircraft dropping bombs, or AC-130 doing a strafe.
Okay.
So
you killed this person, you saw his face. So either was that through the scope, or you were just that close?
It was that close.
Wow.
It was that close. And it's, to this day, I think back, I'm like, how could you really, how could you really, see that? But it's a strange phenomenon and it really has to do with the human brain, I guess. But everything, and a lot of other operators can probably share this sentiment, at least this was my experience, everything slows down to where you can have, like, at that particular time, I was the very first one firing when we got ambushed, because I was in the first vehicle. I was basically in the bed of a pickup truck, for lack of a better explanation. In a very small movement, in a very a little bit of a contested area. So I kind of thought it was going to happen, and it was coming based off of some other information, and it did. So when it did, I was ready. I didn't have any aircraft to work, you know. So as soon as it happened, the thing that triggered it off was an RPG. I heard the RPG and all this gunfire opened up, and there he was, and then there he was, and there he was, and I didn't even think about it. The only thing that happened was instantly I readied my weapon and was sending rounds through these guys that were shooting at me without even thinking. And that goes back to training. That muscle memory is just like boom, happens. And now as it's going, and now I'm shifting my fire to the tree line while trying to get a hold of somebody so we can get aircraft on station, that was just full of muzzle flashes, PKM, which is an automatic weapons fire, all these different weapon systems in the tree line firing at us. And so I'm just laying down suppressive fire along that tree line. But I'm having this whole conversation in my head. And this is probably in the matter of seconds. I had this whole conversation about, man, am I going to get court-martialed? Why am I the only one shooting? I've already killed these people. I'm the only guy shooting. Am I doing something wrong? And so I had this whole conversation. So that's what I mean when I say slow down. In a span of maybe 15 seconds, 3 guys are dead. I'm blasting a tree line. I'm the only one shooting, and I'm having this whole long conversation about, man, am I doing something wrong? And then then everybody else joined the fight, and they're like, and all these rounds. You're like, oh gosh, thank goodness I'm not just shooting. You just go through these things in your head. So I tell you that to say that everything slows down, where something that happens for 15 seconds in your mind, it was 15 minutes or it's 5 minutes. It's like I had plenty of time to have this conversation with myself. And if you had the ability to rewind it and look at it, you would say, actually, all of that happened inside of 15 seconds. So the PTSD thing, I didn't realize it at the time. I was just happy to be on this side of the dirt. By the time we got out of the kill zone and completed that mission and did everything we had to do. But a couple of days later, it kind of dawned on me, why am I still here? How did all of those weapons shoot in my direction? And I'm right out in the open. How did I not get hit? To me, it has everything to do with God. I can tell you that 100%. But you start to think about those things, and it starts to shake you a little bit. And then you start in your head thinking about the expression on somebody's face, or just actually watching somebody as they're labor breathing and getting ready to, their life is at an end, all those kind of things. Like it affects you, and you replay it, and whether you want to or not, it replays in your mind, and you start to find unhealthy ways to kind of cope and deal with those things. For a lot of guys, and I was one of those guys, alcohol was kind of a treatment of choice, but it's doesn't work. It's short lived, and so you really have to find what's going to heal you, and a lot of that is really just talking about it. Like me being on this podcast right now is a big deal, because it's way out of my comfort zone. But it's something that I have to do as a way of reinforcing, the treatment that I've already gotten. That says, hey man, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It happens. Learn what you need to learn from it. Pick up the good pieces and press on with life. Same as people have to do when they lose a loved one, or they're in a horrible car accident, or they lose all their finances. And, I know I'm putting a lot of different stuff out there, but any kind of event that affects you that's so traumatic to you, that you have trouble getting over it. You got to.
You've got a young guy, and I guarantee there's some guys that right now are either planning to go into combat control to join the pipeline or in it. What advice would you give to these young guys who are wanting to go into that field?
Just burn the ships. And what I mean by that is you have to be singularly focused on this is my mission, this is my role in life. So I'm going to sound a little contradictory here. So I say burn the ships and put everything in it. In other words, you can't be distracted. You can't be half in and half out. You can't go into this kind of thing half-hearted because chances are you probably won't make it through the process. And another part of that is, are you really the person that needs to make it through the process? Because you really have to commit yourself to this. So that would be the first thing. The second thing that sounds a little contradictory is forgive yourself up front in the event that that things don't go according to plan. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you don't have to make a backup plan. You say make a backup plan, it's prudent, but I just said burn the ships. Burn the ships means I don't need a backup plan because I'm gonna make it through this process, right? But you have to be prepared to accept that this may not be the place where you need to be. And if that's the case, the process will reveal itself. If this is not the path that God wants you to go down, then you're not going to go down it all the way. And the reason I bring this up is because I've run a lot of selections, officer selection, enlisted operator selection, retraining brand new guys out of the Air Force Academy or ROTCX or right straight out of straight off the streets, and every once in a while there's a handful of guys that come through the process and they don't get picked up. They don't make it. They're not well suited for one reason or another for performing in this profession. It doesn't mean that they don't have talents and gifts that need to be applied elsewhere. Like that's where they need to be, and which is just as honorable and awesome. It's just not here. And this is maybe a part of their non-selection too. I don't know. They just think that their life is over, right? So I say burn the ships, but if you burn the ships and no looking back, going straight forward, and something stops you from getting all the way through that process, life is still good, right? So what I would tell, so that whole other part is kind of a little anecdotal inject for those who will go through the process and not make it. And if they don't, it's okay. It's all right. It's just a thing. Support this nation and good things in the world in another way. For those who do make it through the process, burn the ships. You better be prepared to prepare. All right. So it was a Bobby Knight. I think he said the will to prepare is more important than the will to win, or something to that effect, right? Or the will to prepare to win is more important than the will to win. Like you can will to win all you want, but if you don't get yourself ready mentally, physically, spiritually, if you're not physically ready to go through the door, kind of nothing else matters, right? Because if I completely deplete you physically, all the intestinal fortitude and mental strength in the world isn't going to take you through that process if you just can't get your face out of this. So I would say burn the ships and dedicate yourself to that process and preparing to do it well. The other thing that I would say is be a sponge and be prepared to come into something like this as not just a student in the beginning waiting to be a cool guy in the end, but be prepared to be a student for the rest of your life, because that's really what it is. And that's where the humility part comes in. I know really amazingly capable people that have done some amazing things, that still look at themselves as a student trying to become better. And they're masters of their craft. They really are. But they just don't stop that mindset. So coming in with that humble approach, to getting after this and striking that balance somehow between being confident in your capabilities and being humble in your approach, is not always easy to find. It'll find you one.
Given all that you've experienced, you told me that, I don't know, the scariest or one of the scariest things you did was a death notification to family. Will you just confirm that and maybe elaborate a little bit?
That's a fact. Anyone who has said that they were never scared, never shaken in combat, one of two things: either they're a psychopath or they're lying to you, right? Toughest, most capable, most confident people go into interesting situations like that, and where a lot is on the line, including their life, and it is scary. But being able to operate beyond those fears and things is what's key to a soft operator for sure. So despite anything that I've experienced kind of in those ways in combat, we're doing some unusual things, unnatural things, weren't quite as scary as when I had to be part of very few people that went to notify the family that the person they love isn't coming back the same. I said, I use that phrase instead of not coming back, because they're always with them. They're always with them, just like Mark. I see Mark in the background there. And that pretty awesome, that awesome painting that was rendered. Gosh, I can't believe it's been that long. So yeah, that was, I'll try to make this story quick. It's I went in the squadron, and very few people know at this juncture, but I was one of those people because I was Danny Sanchez's first team chief, NST at the squadron. Not, you had guys in the pipeline, and then Danny came to work for me for lack of better explanation. And so it was my responsibility to make sure that the right guys were giving Danny the right training, and I had the right training plans, and I was part of getting him ready for combat. So it was myself and the commander, chaplain, and then one other officer named Matt. And we got on a small plane and we flew out to El Paso with our blues, and nobody else in the squadron knows. And the reason, as you know, this is so critical, is because next of kin notification, the learning that your loved one has been killed has no business out in the internet sphere. People deserve to learn about these things in a dignified way, and also in a very clear way and truthful way and like factual way. Not all the stuff gets lost in translation. So in order to protect that information, all communications surrounding that are locked off, and people just have no idea. They're going about their day, and you have to walk by them. You're like, hey, what's going on? Oh, are you going somewhere, man? Yeah, I'm probably going to get on I don't know. I got to do this thing. over in Georgia. You lie, you do whatever it takes to protect that information. But in quick fashion, we were on a small plane flying to El Paso. We stopped for fuel along the way, changing to our blues, and I'm changing, and I'm just like, my heart is pounding. I'm like, how's this going to go? Like, it's one thing to deal with, the trauma in combat and those kind of things, but now I've got to look at somebody and look at the pain and feel and see the pain as their heart breaks and they're being delivered this information. I don't want to go into that emotional world. Like, I just don't. It's part of my self-preservation. I just don't want to go down that emotional road. But you have to, because they're going to deal with it one way or another, and they're either going to deal with it without you or with you. So we change into blues, and we land in El Paso, and we get a Suburban, and it's quiet. It's just there's a lot going on with communications back to the people that need to know how things are going and when they're going and precise timing of everything. And we start to pull into this neighborhood, and we pull up, and we already know where it's almost like an operation, right? We pull up, we know exactly where the house is, we know where the sidewalk is, we know where the adjacent neighbors, we know everything about the entire situation. And we start to get out of the vehicles, and it's a tight-knit neighborhood and community. Everybody seems to know each other. And you start seeing people notice you right away because you're full service dress blues, and if you get out of a vehicle that's not from around here, and
you didn't know if Yvette was home, did you, at this time?
I'm trying to remember exactly how all that goes, but having been involved with several of these type of events, I can tell you that when I say it's like a military operation, it is. You have people talking, because sometimes, what if you have divorced parents? You have to notify them exactly at the same time. It's like a time on target.
Yeah.
That precision has to happen. One person's in California, the other person's in New York. You have to time that out so that they're notified at the same time, by same type people delivering the exact same information. Because that's the only right way to do it. I tell you that to say, we knew she was home. We were walking up, and as we were getting out of the vehicle, I'm just like, I don't want to do this, man. I just want to pretend like this didn't happen, like he's okay. And I still haven't dealt with the loss of Danny at this point. You know what I mean? All I know is remember I said that 1/3 rotation? I was in Afghanistan. I receive all the new operators coming in. I'm the senior kind of operator guy in country, and I have to get them all trained up and spun up and certified in some different things, and then let him go out the door. And so he and I were messing around at the operations center, and kind of jabbing it out. We were always doing this little scrap thing where Danny was like, I'll take you, let's go. And that was my last interaction with him. I was trying to work out his nerves. You can see it on their face, their first deployment. You can see, no matter how cool they're trying to be, you can see that there's a part of them that's like, wow, this is real. Man, I could die, all that kind of stuff. So you just try to get them loosened up, it's like, it's going to be okay. And then, they get on the helicopter, and I can only liken it to, what it must be like as a parent sending your kid their first day of school. You get on the bus, you're like, look, buddy, you're good, proud of you, love you. Because I was proud of him and I did love him. We're walking up, and the commander is the one that delivers the information. The squadron commander is the one. And so he's the first one to speak. So we rap on the door, and Danny's little brother comes to the door, and it's like has kind of black barred screen door kind of thing. And he comes to the door, and he looks up at us, and something to the effect of, he turns around and goes back in the house, and he said, "Mom, there's soldiers at the door." And you hear, I remember this as you hear this gasp. It's almost like the oxygen just left the house. It's just like this. You can feel it. I don't know how to describe it, but you just heard this, kind of thing. And she came to the door, and I'm just like, holy cow. And the commander does exactly what he has to do. Very, very direct, I regret to inform you, etc. And then things happen from there. And then, we come inside, and you try to comfort and talk, and through that whole thing. I know I talked to the vet, his mom, at least once, a few times a year. And I know the memory of some of those things are like, I don't even remember from this time to this time, so traumatic. And so that was the scariest thing that I've done. And to this day, remains the toughest thing, for sure. So we just stayed with her for myself and Matt and Silas, who was the other officer with me, just stayed with her, through the entire process, until Danny returned home and everything was done.
I'll put a link in the show notes to that interview with Yvette, because she talks about that notification from her standpoint and talks about you. So, Don, I know you have a hard stop. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I really, I'm honored to been asked to come onto this. I've seen a couple of the episodes. Really, really incredible thing that you're doing, Thad. I'm kind of humbled to be, alongside of some of the great folks that you've had on here. I hope in some little way, some of the things we talk about are helpful to somebody. There's probably a million other things that we could talk about, but maybe we can do that at another more focused time. But no, I really appreciate it.